Okay, hello everyone. Okay. All right. Oh, this isn't connected. Hold on, guys. All right, there we go. Okay. So, first of all, whoever you are, thanks for tuning in and being in the same presence of a moment as I am being right now. Just a few notes before I dive into it. I'd appreciate if the viewers make up their mind. I mean, this is something, everybody has their own choice, but I'd appreciate it if viewers either decide to listen to the whole talk, or if you think you're going to go on and off, like out of the talk, it's like, don't listen to the talk, maybe listen to it later. But the idea is to listen to the whole thing as if, I'm someone who one day hopes to, go on a stage and speak in a large auditorium or whatever. Anyways, I was doing a bit of research to dive into the idea of today's episode, right? I was wondering, like, okay, I've been giving these talks a lot, right? And just for archival reasons for the future generations, I did a bit of research and I found, some ideas considered to be like the most complex metaphysical ideas known to humans, okay? Some of them. And you know what's interesting? When I found this list, I realized that in a lot of these Mr. Within talks, I've brushed upon those points. But I'm going to read it here for you, and the idea is I'm going to pretty much read some information like a chunk of rock, and then, the speaker and the viewers were all going to like sculpt that chunk of rock and see what we can extract from it. So, to simplify this, guys, I don't have the notepad on this computer, but I could take screenshots of the notes and kind of like share them. So I need the viewers to look at the screen. If I'm gonna share something there. This is what I'm gonna be talking about. We live in such an incredible world that I feel sometimes we're waiting to be surprised by the world, and the world is waiting to be surprised by us. The world's like, yo, man, I made human beings. Let's see what they can do. Okay, there we go. So I want the viewers to look at the screen, look at the top of the screen. So, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with the fundamental nature of reality and existence. It is a complex and abstract field that has been explored by many philosophers throughout history. Here are some of the most complex metaphysical ideas known to humans. Okay? So, one thing about metaphysics how can I explain this? The word meta comes from after. It's derivation. So, metaphysics is the suggestion of what comes after the physical recognition of reality. Do you know? But what may come after, that means what these physical creatures have noticed after their physicalism, could actually precede them, their insight, right? It's like, this is the whole thing about mysticism, Vedic thought, that this, even in the Yoga Patanjali Sutras, it says this world that we're in is the shadow of the real one. Now we'll get to this. Anyway, so I'm going to go into these points. So we have the ontological arguments for the existence of God. These arguments attempt to prove the existence of God based on the concept of existence itself. When it comes to the idea of God, I mean, there's something I got to read here about, I think it's the last point. Sorry guys, let me just silence my phone. Imagine in the future somebody's phone rings and they just shout, "Silence!" And then the phone's like, "Sorry, sir, I was just doing my job," Okay, so I'll go through them, then we'll look at them one by one, I guess. Ontological arguments for the existence of God, right? So arguments that prove the existence of God based on the concept of existence itself. An idea we find here is the concept of the necessary existent, and this is a very cool idea to be acquainted to with philosophy. Many people wonder about what is the value of philosophy. I have a bunch of, atheist uncles, and you don't know the debates we have in regards to me. My uncle says that in some sense philosophy and abstraction is a waste of time, right? And he constantly tells me to, like, in some sense, just look at human history, right? But the bizarre thing about human history is that human beings are not just behaving like objects. They have non-physical intentions and inspirations and activities. So what this means is philosophy is the history of the perspective of our species. That's really what philosophy is. That means if you are, this is Mr. Within's opinion, by the way. This is my opinion. Like, if anybody if somebody says, "Yo, Mr. Within, am I a philosopher?" I will look at that person and I will say, if you have to ask, you're not. Let me tell you why. Because it doesn't start with you thinking, "Yo, a philosopher is a superhero with a cape. Let me just wear the cape and feel like a philosopher." To be a philosopher means to be an inquisitive entity of the structure of your reality. That means you have to question not just the existence in front of your eyes, but the inner life, your inner life. How stuff is existing to you behind your eyes. And a way you can figure this out is very easy. I've been born into this life to teach the species how to discriminate between its inner realms and outer realms. That's Mr. Within's job, For a long time, I was like, "Yo, what am I doing calling myself Mr. Within and giving 10,000 talks online?" And then at some point I realized it's a new archetype. And what that means is there's going to be other Mr. Withins in the future. I have this vision that Mr. Within is the archetype, just like the saying they have, where they say in martial arts, when the student is ready, the master appears. I feel when a civilization, when a species and a civilization is ready to advance, the cosmos, gifts that universal sector with a Mr. Within. The Mr. Within is not a person, guys. Okay, Mr. Within is how the experience of existence is an unknown inner phenomena. That's what it means, really. It means that what is looking through my eyes is not what it's seeing. That's really spirituality right there. What you're seeing is not what you're being. So we have idealism, the theory that reality is ultimately mental or spiritual in nature rather than material. This is incredible idealism, okay? Why? Because it's the solipsist's juice, you know? And somebody may be like, Mr. Within, what do you mean it's the solipsist's juice? What I mean is that it's the ignition of reality. It's pretty much idealism it's like we're trying to figure out what the texture of the original world is. This is the beautiful thing about philosophy. You know, I think this is what happens, right? It's as if, like, you know, when it comes to life, when it comes to consciousness, not matter, right? It's as if when we want to know about matter, okay, let's say we have like a philosopher, okay? And this philosopher is like, yo, man, you know, I have so many ideas on the world, but what is the physical world? And the philosopher, right, understands that his philosophies are coming from his mind, so he goes to a psychologist. And then the psychologist is like, yo, philosopher, I never thought you'd come here, you know? And let me explain, you know, your philosophies are coming from your brain and the secrets of the brain, you know? And then in some sense, imagine the philosopher. Okay, here, I got it. Perfect. I'll polish the story up here. This is the story. There's this philosopher, okay? This philosopher, in some sense, doesn't know how he's being a being, okay? This philosopher looks in the mirror and it's like, okay, I'm a physical entity, you know, and it notices this as, like, the philosopher notices it has ideas. Okay, so the philosopher's like, yo, you know, I can't figure out truth. Let me go to the psychologist. Okay, and then the philosopher goes to the psychologist and says to the psychologist, what is truth? And the psychologist says, I can't figure it out. Sorry, guys. Okay, no, whatever. Here, it'll work. Okay, so the philosopher goes to the psychologist and says, yo, I can't figure out truth. Do you have a clue? And the psychologist is like, okay, so your philosophies are coming from your brain, from your psyche. Your psyche is a projection of your brain. So in some sense, the philosopher and the psychologist both realize they don't have an answer, right, to what truth is. So then the psychologist says, let's go to the biologist. Okay, so then they go to the biologist, and the biologist explains the brain and everything. Do you know? It's like the philosopher explained the conclusion of the ideas. The psychologist explained how the ideas came about, let's say, and then they go to in some sense, to the biologist, and the biologist is like, okay, all this psychological behaviors, like your philosophical idea, which arose from a psychic nature, and then the psychologist is like, okay, the psychic nature arose from a biological nature. So the philosopher psychologists have gone to the biologist, and the biologist is like, yo, man, check the brain. You see this brain? This is how it works. Right? And so the philosophers and the psychologists and the biologists, now for a second, the biologist realizes he doesn't understand how the basics of cells, the most basic element of cells works. And then they realize, oh my God, we can't answer the biological questions, right? We in some sense need a chemist. Okay? So from the biological question, from the what the philosopher couldn't answer, what the psychologist couldn't answer, they went to the biologist. What the biologist couldn't answer, they went to the chemist. Okay? And then the chemist, like, yo, shows the chemical properties and all that. And then what the chemist can't answer, with the chemist, they all go to the physicist. They all go to the physicists, right? And then they realize at some point, there is no one else. You know, they reach the bottom of the line where we see a particle that has content but is majorly empty. So what I'm trying to say is the questions of what is truth, it all came down, the burden of proof came down to the physicist. Okay, but then the philosopher was like WTF, because when the philosopher asked the physicist and all of them asked the physicist was like, hold on guys, let me go and do some theoretical physics and I'll be back. And that was the moment where the philosopher understood that in some sense the theoretical approach to life is always there. The way we are being certain of physical reality is through abstraction. And it's strange because we're considering abstraction not to be real. We are using something unreal to experience reality, and yet we're calling it unreal, which doesn't make sense. So what I'm telling you is that now it goes back up the mountain, and this is where the questions, if the philosopher was like, yo, how is the origin of this causal presence of my being like physical, they went to the physicist, and the physicist had to do theoretical physics, right? But now imagine if it's the other way, and then there's a physicist. Okay, instead of we starting from the philosopher, let's say there's a physicist. Okay, the physicist is now fascinated by the other side, wants to understand, in some sense, the nature of mind, intelligence, and behavior, and all of this. So the physicist realizes, yo, I've understood, like, to some degree, certain physical properties, certain laws of this space-time continuum, the space we're in. Now, let me go to the chemist. The physicist goes to the chemist and realizes how, like, these basic chemicals lead to, let's say carbon leads to the basic, building blocks of the body and whatnot, right? And then from the chemist, right, the physicist sees what the chemist has to say, and then again goes to the same thing happens. The chemist goes to the biologist, then the biologist, then all right, it's okay, something's happening to the brain. Then this physicist is like, okay, so the biologist is showing me this brain, right? So first there was this world of just laws, like unconscious laws in this space. Then in some sense there came, so what it is like there was this physical chessboard, right? Then there came these chemical chess moves. Then there came these biological pieces, biological setups, let's say, biological openings. And so what I'm saying is what the biologist can't answer. So the physicist that wants to know, yo, okay, an evolution made an object into a subject to itself. How's this happening, right? I mean, it's like from the physical part, you understood the existential component of life. So the physicist is going to be like, yo, the biologist can't answer my question of how a personality is, like how we're being an animate being, like not how we're being, but the physicist wants to know about the mystery of consciousness. And so once there aren't any answers, let's say that means the physicist went to the chemist didn't have an answer. Went to the biologist, they all had theories, not an answer. From the biologist, let's say the physicist goes to a psychologist, and the psychologist, you see, it's getting more abstract as the professions are going to less of a consideration of the contingency of physical law, right? Physical properties. What that means is like a physical object has turned into a non-physical verb to itself, but it's also maintaining its existentialism. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that it's like the idea again, it's just going up. Now the reason I'm going back up from the physicist is because there's more than the philosopher. So it's as if the physicist, I'll repeat. The physicist went to the chemist, no answer. Went to the psychologist, okay. Went to the chemist, no answer. Went to the biologist, just, some sort of answer. let's say no answer. And then from the biologist went to the psychologist, no answer. And from the psychologist, let's say went to the sociologist, no answer. Or went to the philosopher, and then from the no, philosopher would be went to this. Okay, forget sociologist. Forget sociologist. Now I'm joking. Somebody's like, yo, Mr. Within, what do you have against sociologists? They study so much society and they don't change it. I don't get it. What we're teaching sociology students. We're just teaching them how messed up the system is, and they're like, I understand. All right, I'm gonna go do something else that makes money. So, anyways, what the psychologist can't answer, we go to the philosopher. What the philosopher can't answer, we go to the mystic. The mystic is the closest thing to an astronaut suit for a transcendental being, to a biological astronaut suit for a transcendental being. Okay, this is poetry, but what I mean is that the mystic is the human being that is using the unknown to figure out what knowledge is, right? But in some sense, the average man is using knowledge to figure out what the unknown is, which is an impossible endeavor. People don't understand. Like I appreciate like informing the past generations, and I have respect for teachers, even though I wish to see the educational system change. I have respect for any human being that has carried on some torch, has passed down anything. You're all, in some sense, honored and loved and will be cared for by the advanced civilization in the future. I'm telling you, any being that has, and in any instance, you have had an impulse. I don't care if you're even human, non-human, whatever. Any being that protects the human species and the life that moves the human species is, in some sense, blessed by the advanced civilization. Let me tell you why. Because we are like a bunch of monkeys, on this giant tree. We're a bunch of monkeys on this rock in the middle of nowhere, and we have experienced a sort of collective reaction to our own hopeless anguish. The cool thing about life in 2023, and the future generations are going to probably thank us, is that we were hopeless. We all felt we are going to go extinct, and it was just to have fun while we were here. That's what we thought it was. But it's not just that. This world loves itself beyond itself. Anyways, let's continue with the list. So idealism, a theory that reality is ultimately mental or spiritual in nature rather than material. For example, if you're religious, you're an idealist. If you're a solipsist, you're an idealist. You see, guys, to be honest, let me tell you what's going on. Everything is a duality that human beings can talk about, and anything we identify falls somewhere in the spectrum of the duality we contextually impose for what we see. It is not enough to exist. When we are conscious, when we are experiencing our existence. Dear human beings of the modern era, dear ancestors of the advanced humanity, okay. Sorry guys, I got emotional, then started coughing. Yeah. All right, let's go through the list. Substance dualism, the belief that there are two distinct kinds of substances in the world, mind and matter, which interact with each other. The problem of universals, this is a beautiful one. The philosophical debate about the nature of general concepts such as redness or justice and whether they exist independently of individual objects. So to be honest, guys, I guess I'll say this, that my vision, if somebody's like Mr.Within, do you have an agenda? All people who have come and spoken about metaphysics and spirituality, usually it seems like they have an agenda. Do you have an agenda? And I will say, of course I have an agenda. I'm a temporary being. To not have an agenda in the limited world I'm in is like to be a fool. But what is my agenda? And so this is Mr.Within's agenda, okay? Pretty much, I ask myself, how should I live in this life? And my view was that, like, first of all, whatever I become in the future, it's going to be something that's like influencing the world, whether I like it or not. So then I thought about, okay, maybe I shouldn't think about what kind of self I want to be in the future, but rather what kind of world I want to be in the future. And from that mentality, I was like, yo, these are the options, right? Either I advance myself as an individual, that means I ignore the idea of like civilization and the collective and everything, and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna run to be the most advanced being in the universal sector. This is the point of being an individual. Most people think the point of individual is to just live a happy life. That's the point of the body, maybe, but the point of the mind is something else. Those who have come to live as a body, they will repeat until they realize there's more than bodies here. And then those who have come here to live as a mind, it repeats until you realize you are causing it to repeat. And then once you go beyond your karma, what that means is karma is a matter of identity of attention. Really, the soul is neither an object or a subject, so it's technically this view that the uncreated does not have karma. From a monotheistic theological lens, the soul of man was not created. Man's soul was not created. Man was given, was imbued a soul. That means the soul of man was never created, or it's not something I think it can be destroyed. Even if people say it can, it doesn't. Invalid, I find. So this is my agenda. I was like, okay, so which does it make sense? A win-lose strategy or a win-win strategy? And my understanding was win-win. And I'm like, do I want to be an advanced being in an unadvanced world? Or do I want to be an unadvanced being in an incredibly advanced world? And I realized that's the value of giving. So my vision is, the sooner, it's like, to me, the coolest thing is to be in a world of advanced beings. That's the coolest thing. That's the agenda. The agenda is to, in some sense, activate the advanced humanity and have the species realize that the greatest idea in the outer realms is the advanced civilization. An advanced civilization is such an incredible idea because it's something that you can't even worship. Do you know? Because it's something that you have to, in some sense, how would I say it? It's not something you worship, it's something you partake. Best case scenario, the whole everybody on the planet, it becomes like, everybody becomes a crew member of Spaceship Earth. I really hope Spaceship Earthism resurfaces again. So my vision is to, as quickly as possible, try to get the species in the most advanced state, because if the species of 8 billion beings are in their most advanced state, they will most likely create something advanced. So you see the idea per se is not to go build the advanced civilization. The idea is to make the builders advanced. So as we advance the users of technology, then the users of technology will automatically update the technology. This thing written here about the problem of universals. So universal is like the idea of a color. Somebody says, like, what does the color blue mean? Right? Like, what's the definition of blue? It's just a color. It just is what it is. There is no explanation. If you were like Jean-Paul Sartre, existential atheist, you would pretty much be like, there is no essence. There is no surface and essence. You'd have that kind of view. Right? There is no depth. There is no surface of the ocean and the depth of the ocean. From the French existentialist atheist view, they're both, there's just ocean. But something that human beings don't realize, it's not a bell curve, it's a sine wave. All human ideas. Right now, like the way I'm speaking, some people might be like, yo, this guy, this guy is like, yo, was he in his past life or whatever, right? You know what's funny? I don't know who I was in my past life, but I know who I am in my future life. In my future life, I am the collective timeless presence of the species. What that means is energy is not in a world, but energy is doing something where a self can experience a world. So we have the theory of forms. This is number 5. This one, guys, this is I've like, this is something where I would say my spiritual experiences are very close to this. The theory of forms. Plato's theory that the material world is an imperfect copy of an ideal world of abstract forms. And guys, I hope to see that day, where, you know, our species is haunted by dualism. Or maybe I could term it better. So Plato's world of forms, let me tell you something beautiful. There was a guy who I would say this is a person who had access to Plato's world of forms. I'm also a person who is claiming that my inner realm seem to be like sponsored. Some of my inner realm seems to be sponsored from there, you know. And so there was this mathematician named Ramajuan. This guy was like a next level genius doing things in mathematics. People were like, yo, this is miracle level shit. Like, how's this guy doing this? Right? And then they would go ask him. And this guy, he was this genius Indian mathematician. Okay? And he would just say, I have a Devi. Right? Devi, D-E-V-I. It's a Vedic term. I have a Devi. Right? And people would be like, what does that mean? And he would say, my Devi bleeds geometry. Right? And people would be like, yo, what does that mean? But a person in Indian culture would understand that what Ramajuan was saying was that he had a deity. A deity was guiding his mathematical knowledge. This mathematician was in an interdimensional relationship with a deity figure that would bleed geometry, meaning he had a relationship with a transcendental geometrical entity. Okay. Now, some people, this is my hunch, is that the Plato's world of forms is like a membership thing, and it's one of those things that we were all members of, but some have forgotten that they have a membership, like one of those gym memberships that was a good decision short term, but long term it was like, what did I do? My aim is to just, get a world of advanced beings, because that would be awesome. And advanced humanity, just wonder about the advancement of it. The idea of the advanced civilization is so beautiful that I can't tell the viewers how many times in these talks, the moment in my inner realms, the idea is connected to the advanced civilization somehow. It's been such a beautiful inner realm vision that I've gone to just talking about the advanced civilization. So there is Plato's world of forms. I think everybody has access. I'm telling you, the way I have experience of it is because my mind, like some people I remember, I'm a person who I have a spiritual perspective on life, but never I've been like I've been able to discriminate between my mind sight and in some sense my biological eyes and that sight. Okay? Now some people, their mind sight overlays on their outer life, so then they can see stuff around people, like imagine you see someone and you're like, yo, there's a aura behind you, or there's a entity behind you, or I don't know, there's something behind you. So in my mind sight, for me, rather than seeing like entities too much, it actually went towards automated geometry. I coined the term living geometry. Geometry that moves on its own, that seems alive, but does not seem to be alive in accordance to a humanized ideal or a humanized context. Anyways, let's keep going. So we have the principle of sufficient reason. The principle that everything must have a reason or cause for its existence or occurrence. This is such a deep idea because I don't know if people know my YouTube channel got a bit of traction from got its starting traction from Alan Watt videos, and Alan Watts famously said an incredible sentence where he was saying that just like a tree apples, the planet peopled. And see, this is the elegance and beautiful thing about Zen, right? I remember I was in Dundas Square. A bunch of these Tibetan monks had come were visiting Toronto, Dundas Square. It was in my break. I was smoking a cigarette, and then I remember I go and sit down to talk to these Tibetan monks, and I'm giving these Mr.Within talks. So I went there to ask them about Zen Master Dogen quotes. So pretty much like I wanted to get their opinion on a Zen Master Dogen quote. And then I realized that these people were living at such a simple inner level of life that it was as if like they were there was a moment where I thought all Zen monks in the world are looking at everybody on the planet and they're like, yo, why are you guys being so unnecessarily complex and suffering for it? Like, can't you see life could be so easy? Can't you see life can be so easy that, like you could be a renunciate Swami living in a temple in a mountain, and even when the leaves of the tree fall, you may not want to touch the leaf. You may not want to change reality because you think everything is divine. But the free will is also divine, which is here also to structure and play its part in reality. You see, the absence of will, in some contexts, sure, action through inaction, you got to see the world move you before you moved the world. And then you felt that's truth, sure. There was this yogi who had found like 107 ways to get enlightened. I remember reading it in this Vedic book. I forget the name. I think it was in the Puranas or something, but whatever. This dude had found 107 ways to get enlightened. And I was like, that's hilarious. He's found 107 ways to notice duality. And it's infinite ways. When it comes to the mystery of who we are and what we are, it's like we're equipped with what we need to look at, right? Like we are the problem that we're trying to solve. That's what mysticism is. Mysticism is trying to solve a problem if the problem is everything. Whether it's a yogi seeking a moksha beyond samsara. So this thing that everything must have a reason or cause, right? This is something that if you're an idealist, it makes sense. But at the same time, if you're, I guess, an evolutionary biologist, you would have the view that intelligence came later on in life. So it would mean that things were happening without a humanized reason. Do you understand? That means it was, let's say it's happening for a reason beyond human understanding, like that argument could be made. But if reason is a concept or something that applies to an entity, to like the human being, if it's like relative to the human, somebody says in the chat section, I just moved back to Dallas area for a bit. I don't think many advanced beings here. Smiley face. So here's the thing. Advancement is something that it's it activates through passion. So if somebody does not have passion in the moment, you cannot expect an advance. Like I shouldn't say expect advancement, but let me say it this way. The idea is, I thought about this. I'm like, there's 8 billion human beings. I'm this dude who's like started this thing where I'm saying advanced civilization, right? And so I was thinking, okay, what would that mean? What would it realistically mean? How would 8 billion human beings actually go about advancing civilization? So the idea is that because we start off, it's like 8 billion internal private inner subjective private servers, and then one outer public physical server, right? So everybody is starting in their own world. So you have to start actually envisioning an advanced civilization that is real to your own mind, and you have to start walking towards the advanced civilization of your own inner realms in the outer realms, and then the advanced civilization in the outer realm will guide you and realign your inner advanced civilization to the actual advanced civilization intended for this parallel reality. For this plane of existence. So what I'm trying to tell you is you can't see an advanced being, because advancement is about awareness, and not all of awareness is revealed through action and communication, right? Like you could see there could be a person who everybody thinks like that person is a dumbass, okay? But that person could be the most advanced being, because he has the least desires out of everybody, right? So it could be like, imagine there's like, I'll give you an example, right? Imagine there's a bunch of people, I saw this, okay? Let me tell you a moment where, I was among my peers, and in some sense, I felt like a righteous dumbass, so let me... So the thing is, the thing about the way I was raised is that there was religion, in the household. And through religion, I've always had a sense that if I am honest, I get to see the real me. But if I am dishonest, I'm literally occupying the moment artificially. So anyways, I remember when in high school, okay, we had this cafeteria, and then so I'm in line, 3 other people are in front of me, and the cafeteria person decides to just step out while there's 4 kids in the line, okay? And 3 kids go, like I was standing there, and they were all it was like our class had just finished, so they were my classmates, okay? And so my peers, and so we're there in the line. These 3 run and they steal chips, okay? And guys, this was like a school where those kids had a complete capability of not needing to steal, right? But anyways, in that moment, they go and steal chips, and the 3 of them, they steal some things, and all 3 of them run out, right? So I'm standing there, and it's like these 3 best friends in front of me, and all 3 of them steal these things, and they run out, okay? And I remember I was just waiting until the guy came back, and I just stared. It was just, I just silently watched. And at that time, I was, too shy, too insecure to actually, how can I say it, to go and tell them, yo, put it back. I didn't have that strength then, I didn't even know myself then enough to, I didn't have enough, I didn't accept myself to maneuver myself at that time. But I remember I watched and I saw those guys, right? And in that moment, it was as if like something, and for a moment I thought like, yo, imagine if I was born in a culture and everybody in the culture was stealing, right? And then they look at the person who's not stealing and they're like, you idiot, you dumbass, right? Where it's like, in a world of thieves, you're trying to be a good person, right? And so this is the hilarious thing, because it's the type of world you choose that you end up going there, believe it or not. There's a poem by Hafiz. He says, oh man, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something like, he says, there's something in this life where every heart will get what it is truly asking for. Right? And if you live artificially, your heart might ask for your own like judgment and punishment. Right? There is something that poker players know. Okay, like I'm someone who, like, you know, I haven't played poker in a very long time, but there was a time where I would just watch ridiculous amount of poker videos, and I would just buy these granola bars and dip them in peanut butter and like a savage just watch poker videos. And just eat peanut butter. It was like, I don't know, I don't know what, like, you know, life was tough. Well, I was going through something back then, you know. But anyways, in poker, something professional poker players know, or the sharks know, is that there are some people who haven't earned their money. They haven't earned their money. They come to the poker. So imagine somebody stole a lot of money. He comes to the poker casino and he sits down, gets a bunch of drinks, right? And then the professional poker players who are sober, just staring, right, who are just drinking water, they look at this guy and they're like, this guy is literally going all in every bet, and it's as if he doesn't feel he deserves the money he stole, so subconsciously he's making himself lose without even consciously realizing it. And then these sharks go around this person, and as the person keeps losing, they keep just smiling at the dumbass. And do you see what I'm saying? So this is the thing about honesty being an incredible managing force, because it keeps a level of simplicity that when the artificial comes, you can discriminate. If you are someone who, let's say, you dabble in the artificial a lot, that means, let's say, when you talk to people, rather than just let's say, being the simplest version of yourself, you're like different things to different people, you know? Like, that would be something where, how would I say it? It's as if you have 100 years to perform as a conscious entity in the space-time continuum, and with what caliber, with what stature, with what composure, elegance, and might will you walk this world? Will you go forth into the unknown? How will you go forth into the unknown? And this is where the idea of the advanced civilization, the advanced humanity comes. Do you know? Anyways, to continue with this list, we have determinism, the theory that every event oh my god, sorry guys, hold on. Okay, sorry about that. To continue. Alright, I gotta find a different song. Holy shit. Sorry guys, hold on. Okay. So where was I? Determinism, the theory that every event, including human actions, is ultimately determined by prior causes and therefore not truly free. Determinism could be a huge reason, why we think that the idea of the self is an illusion, the free will is an illusion. The nature of time. The philosophical debate about the nature of time, including whether it is absolute or relative and whether the future is determined or open. This is an incredible idea because in ancient Greece, they had this idea of two types of time, chronos and kairos. Chronos was chronological time, and kairos was defined as the right time to do something. But I would interpret it, I would explain it to the viewers as this, that the ancient Greeks believed in, gods walking on clouds. And so that's another way of saying that, for example, imagine you're an ancient Greek philosopher, and there was somebody comes and tells you there's a story that Apollo came down in somewhere, and people saw Apollo or something. Then the philosopher would be a god that is beyond time, intervening in time and doing something to the individual in time is a different type of time than the chronological time. And so what I'm trying to say, or what this is saying in regards to time being absolute or relative, there is a sense that time is just an idea we gave to how stuff is changing in space, but then there's a view that the idea of time, that means the past and future are there whether the brain of this creature projects it or not. Then we have the problem of induction. The philosophical problem of how to justify our belief in the future based on past experience. See, I'm under the impression that deduction is you are looking at something simple and extracting a complex, getting something complex out of it. And induction is you're looking at the general. So in deduction is you're looking at something specific and making a general conclusion. And induction, I'm under the impression it's looking at the general and making a specific conclusion. So the philosophical problem of how to justify our belief in the future based on past experience. So this is the bizarre thing where it's like our past is being recycled to, in some sense, to be something new, which ends up being our experience of our future. But the idea of the future is actually like an ever-changing moment. So you can have a sense of time, you can have a sense of past, future, present, but what we're actually experiencing is that there's a space, and then there is movement of stuff in this space. Now, we could treat the space as the invisible force, part of the invisible force moving the stuff that we don't understand fully, or the space could be separate from the force. That means invisible forces also require space to be in rather than the invisible force creating the illusion of space for the object moving. So I'm trying to think okay, so the problem of how to justify our belief in the future based on past experience. We don't need to justify our belief in the future. Really, when it comes to the future, it's literally we just create a strategy. We see probabilities. Out of those probabilities, we choose a strategy. Then it's like, regardless whether you believe it or not, the future will reveal what it is. That's it. I remember the day I started this YouTube channel, I had no idea if like millions of people were suddenly gonna come, or if it's slow or whatever or something like that, right? But it's as if I had this vision, this strategy, implemented it, and then now I get to see what it is. Do you see now? I get to see like it's in its magnitude. But the cool thing is, it's never ending. So if somebody says, Mr. Within, it's like, how do you feel about your subscriber count? I'm like, these talks are gonna outlive me. As long as the internet exists and this is here, and eternity, gracefully guides and guards these talks, that's the cool thing. This voice right now, which is being a live stream, like my soul is right now in this voice, right now here, just behind these words, watching the whole moment as the moment. But those who will hear this in the future, you will see the effect of the Spirit through your own cause. And that's the remarkable thing. Amin Jabr Ansari was temporary, but Mr. Within was not. So I think everybody who's communicated anything online has managed to successfully live in the future. A part of them is living in the future. Then we go to non-dualism, the belief that ultimate reality is not divided into separate entities, but rather everything is interconnected and ultimately one. Yeah, this is a big one. So, if everything is one, I guess we don't need to do anything. We don't even need to exist. Doesn't matter. I mean, even if we don't exist, it's still one, right? The idea of oneness means that there is no such thing as life and death, which means that you're not an entity. So if the truth of reality is non-dual, which would be another way of saying the truth of this world for human beings is dehumanized. So if there is a dehumanized state of being that is the ultimate state, if you realize non-dualism, let's say you go and get enlightened and you're like, oh my God, I thought I was a temporary object, but now I realize I am, the light in the whole cosmos, light in the room of the whole cosmos, right? And the person sees spirituality is hilarious because it's like an eternal being. It's like a temporary being realizing it's eternal, but when you realize you're eternal, it never mattered if you realized it or not. Do you understand? An eternal being cannot make a mistake because it's not conditional. Do you understand? Right now, I'm a conditional entity. If there's not oxygen, if the atmosphere goes away, we die. We're conditional beings. We're conditional to our environment. That means a person's mind is not just their own mind, but it's their ability to ride the waves of the mind of the whole environment and the world event. Philosophers are pretty much like surfers, but they are surfing the dimensions of inner sight and perspective. They're surfing the dimensions of conception. So that's it for that, I guess. If the audience feels like they can help me, it's like if you feel like there's something I can share about these, or if you have a question on these, feel free to ask. All right, let me see what is there really to say. So, what are some of the most complex ideas known to humans? So, I'm pretty much looking at a human being, and I'm like, a human being is an objective existence and a subjective experience simultaneously being one being, one moment of self aware being. So, in reality, life for the inner realm, for the mind, is self awareness. Self awareness means that our brain had enough of a intelligence to try to figure itself out before it figured out the world. This means that our consciousness had to choose if it wanted to let the environment move it or if it wanted to move in the environment. Because we chose to move in the environment, we became responsible for the shape of meaning. You see, when somebody becomes selfless, when somebody becomes simple, when these yogis go into the forest, sit down and meditate, what they're doing is actually deactivating how their attention is keeping themselves as an idea. And if you sit for 10 to 20 minutes and just watch your moment as if you're watching your whole life like a film, after 10 to 20 minutes of just not like meditating or any of this, you're just there to watch what you are. Like you're being in a world, in an unknown world, as an unknown being, and it's like you're using a known strategy to see how an unknown being is experiencing the unknown in a known world. Like is experiencing known variables in an unknown world.